If you can put aside the excessive need for control, the perfectionism, and the people-pleasing throughout your day, if you can do that, then you might be able to listen to your true self a little bit better. You might be able to listen to that wise heart that you have.
Keep watching to learn more.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Emmy Vadnais, co-host with Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is finding magic in the tragic with my guest, John Tsilimparis, who is a psychotherapist, mental health consultant, and former adjunct professor at Pepperdine University and UCLA. John is in private practice and was a former staff therapist in the Department of Psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and in the Department of Addiction Medicine at Kaiser Permanente. He's a member of the advisory committee for the mental health platform Wondermind. John is author of Retrain Your Anxious Brain, Practical and Effective Tools to Conquer Anxiety, and The Magic in the Tragic, Rewriting the Script on Grief and Discovering Happiness in Our Darkest Days. If you enjoy this program, please like, subscribe, press the bell icon so you can get notifications when more programs come out like this on New Thinking Aloud, and share it with those who you think may enjoy it. John is joining us from Los Angeles, California. Now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, John. It's a real pleasure to have you with me on New Thinking Aloud today.
Thanks for having me.
On New Thinking Aloud, we cover topics related to spirituality, consciousness, the amazing field of parapsychology, paranormal, health, philosophy, and of course psychology. And research shows that when people are caught up in their thoughts, their emotions, of course going through maybe even grief like we're going to discuss today, they can have a difficult time connecting with their own inner knowing, their intuition, which is a lot of what we talk about on New Thinking Aloud, psychic functioning and ability to find answers within and connect with the larger universe, the oneness that we're all a part of, that quantum entanglement teaches us. So we're going to talk about how people can find the magic in the tragic, and how can we do that when so many people want to run away from their pain and suffering?
Let me just start by saying that generally, emotional pain and adversity and grief is not usually a subject that people feel comfortable talking about. In many areas, it's taboo. So I'm hoping that this discussion can open up a fresh dialogue about it so that maybe your listeners can walk away with a different perspective about their own experience with emotional pain, grief, and adversity. And I also wanted to say, too, that when we talk about emotional pain and grief and just difficult times, we're not just talking about losing a loved one. We're talking about divorces and breakups and, career disappointments and all kinds of loss, financial hardships, faded dreams, any kind of adversity that all of us face. And, it's important to remember, too, that grief is one of the most universal themes of being human. It's as universal as laughter and love. But the problem with it is that nobody wants to feel it. Everybody wants to escape it, and for good reason. Who wants to feel pain? So, but we also know that running from pain can make things worse. And today, given the state of affairs in the world, given the way that everything is going on in the United States, especially the political divisiveness, I think people are a little more numbed out to it, and they are more apt to run away from their emotions than they are to either accept them or to deal with them.
You suggest in your book for people to lean into their grief and loss versus running away. How can people do that and face themselves when it's easy to get distracted with social media or find other things to spend their time doing?
So the book suggests in many different ways, which we can talk about the concept of building emotional resilience. And building emotional resilience is about finding ways to convert this emotional pain, these hardships, these difficult times into thriving. In other words, you're not trying to get over it. You're trying to go through it. And by going through it, you really build up a lot of character. You build a lot of wonder and curiosity about your grief. No one's ever going to like grief, and no one's ever going to like emotional pain. But what if you could find a way to be moved by it, to be inspired by it? And if you can do that, then you will be much better prepared for future hardships, which will come. We don't know in what form, but just getting older is a hardship. And I can attest to that. So there's value in not avoiding your grief. And the best way to do it is by creating intention, like the book described, creating intention and putting your mind to actually being more of an observer of your grief than just being a victim of your grief.
What is the magic that people can find as they discover some more of what we have to share here today and what's in your book? What are some of the delights they can actually find in the face of tragedy, loss, grief, and suffering?
So all of us have things that we love and things that inspire us. And I try to emphasize in the book, as well as I do with my patients, that if you can develop an aesthetic mindset, meaning you can build the ability to notice beauty in small things throughout the day, whether it's in nature or music or art or a hobby that you have or exercising or working out or cooking or gardening, the list goes on. If you can find these aesthetics and you can engage and make the commitment to engage in these aesthetics, when you are in your darkest moments, which is the hardest time to do it, but you can do it. When you do that, you are again reassociating grief with beautiful things. And so in that process, you might find some beauty in your suffering. You might learn how to dignify your suffering. And by doing that, you also reduce it. So the bottom line is you can find purpose in your pain, but it won't happen without the intention. And everyone's got aesthetics. You do too. You and I could talk about our aesthetics for days and days and days. For me, it's music. I like music. So I intentionally listen to sad music when I'm feeling sad because it legitimizes my sadness. It makes me feel like, well, whoever wrote this piece of music knows exactly how I feel because he or she is feeling that. And then I also know that so many other people love this music too. So I'm not alone. Maybe right now somebody is listening to the same piece of music. And even if the piece of music is really sad and it's hard to listen to, I know that after I listen to it, I feel like I evolved a little bit more because I say to myself, if I can get through this piece of music, I can get through almost anything. And there are music pieces that make me really sad, especially classical pieces.
There's a benefit to laughter and also a benefit to crying from a biochemistry perspective, right?
Yes, there are. There's benefits to, well, let's take the benefits of inspiration and awe. There's a science out there called nanoaesthetics. I don't know how established it is, but I read it in a book, a very good book called Your Brain on Art. And what they discovered is that when you bathe your senses in inspiration and awe of your liking, of your choosing, the neurotransmitters, the floodgates of your neurotransmitters open up. And these chemicals like oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine are released. And so you feel euphoria. So that's one. The other thing is that it activates a part of the brain, the executive brain. And once that's activated, you are much more hopeful. You're much more practical. You're much more apt to think positively about the future. You can solve problems better. So that kind of exposure is evolutionarily a wise thing to do. Mm-hmm. So you're doing a lot. You're reducing your grief, but you're also helping, in your own psychological development, if you look at it that way.
Something that's really struck me to my heartstrings when I was reading your book is how when you were younger, just a boy, you suffered with anxiety and panic attacks. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, now that you have spent all this time becoming a professional psychotherapist, what that experience was like for you and how you have moved through that and grown, why that happened, and where you are now with that.
So I was not born with the gift of temperance. I was always an edgy, anxious young boy. I had insomnia, and I still have insomnia, by the way. And I think it's just the way that I was wired, because my brothers were not the same as me. And there was abuse in my family, and there was also tragedy, and tragedy came early. And, my immigrant parents, although they were wonderful people and good-hearted and had good intentions, didn't really understand the grief process in a way that would benefit their young children. So for me, I was very alone with my grief. And little by little, I just started to discover, again, getting back to the aesthetic mindset, I started to discover that music was very important to me, and it moved me in many ways, among other things. And so I started to pair the two together as much as I could. And I found ways to, again, I'm never going to love my grief, but I found that my melancholy was my friend, and that I found ways to validate myself. And yeah, it's been a struggle in the sense that through my teens, 20s, and early 30s, my anxiety was still, untenable at times. These days, that's a little bit different because I've had a lot of therapy and I've worked on it and I've written books about it. So I'm a little more immersed in it in a positive way. So whenever I do get anxiety, I feel like I'm failing forward as opposed to failing backwards. So it's been an uphill climb. But I just don't think that it's a death sentence. I don't have to identify with that anxious boy as much.
So when you were growing up, you suggest that it's how you're wired and also your environment that led you to have those experiences?
Yes, I do believe, and it sounds like a cliche, but it is true. Unless they discover something new, we think that mental health conditions are usually a nexus of nature versus nurture. It's the way that you are wired and the way that you were born. And I was wired with a susceptibility to anxiety. And then the environment, how you're supported, traumas that you go through, life events, acts of God that you can't help. And then sometimes those events alter your central nervous system and people change. And sometimes people can get past it. And sometimes people live with it the rest of their lives. So it's hard to say. There's no chicken or egg. It's a confluence of influence. Psychology relies heavily on the subjective, and we don't have one particular reason for any kind of condition.
And let's just talk about that for a moment. You mentioned condition. How much of people having, for example, anxiety or what's often termed as depression, what sometimes can really be normal grief, is really normal? Because it seems that many people, maybe not everybody, but close to it sometimes it seems, deals with some type of mental health challenge that it almost just seems maybe part of the human condition, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that we all have the capacity for mental stability and instability. Even the most ostensibly balanced person in your mind, think of somebody that's the most balanced and even-keeled person. Even that person, given some kind of trauma or given a life cycle change, is capable of having, pretty intense symptoms that could cause impairment. Impairment's always the key word. If you have impairment where you can't go to school, you can't work, you can't take care of your kids and stuff like that, then you may have a diagnosable condition. But, so it's very common. A lot of people have it, and people have it episodically. You can have deep episodes of anxiety and depression, and you can also come out of it and continue to live your life. So my goal in the book was also to try to depathologize mental health conditions, because all of us experience grief, hopefully not to the point of impairment. And if you can look at it in terms of prevention, because, it's always easier to prevent a mental health crisis than it is to repair one. Once you're in it, it's harder to get out of the hole. So if you are aware of it and you are constantly working to find that magic in your tragic, you're much more prepared. You're much more resilient.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the program is because it seems that more people are dealing with mental health conditions. Is there evidence for this?
Yes. So a few months ago, there was a recent report by the CDC, and they're pretty solid in terms of their data. And so they found that over the last 10 years, even before the pandemic began, and again, there's no chicken or egg on this one either, instances of depression has gone up about 60%. And that's a big number for a nation of, I think, 450 million. I don't remember how many we are. And so that just shows you that, more people are coming forward and reporting it, which is a good thing. And it also shows you that even before the pandemic, which caused a lot of depression, people were already, and I believe that there was already an epidemic of loneliness at that time. And we don't know exactly why, but it could be due to the advent of smartphones and the isolation results of social media, that people are at home communicating with people, but they're not physically and in person communicating, which is what human beings need. That's why we had such a dip in people's moods and such a rise in instances of mental illness during the pandemic, because the pulling away from each other, the social isolation and the social distancing really, really affected people. We weren't sure what that was going to be like. And now we know that it's very detrimental. And so if you're always at home communicating on Instagram and TikTok, and you're not going out and you're spending more time alone at home, you leave yourself susceptible to mental illness.
Yeah, I noticed probably 5+ years ago or so that more and more people wanted to communicate less, even on the telephone with a verbal conversation. They wanted to text or communicate via email. It's like our love for technology in a certain way is kind of taking us over. It's like a double-edged sword, perhaps.
It is. We could talk forever about the benefits of social media and the way it brings us together, the way people can communicate in a different way and voice their voice, so to speak. But we also know that excessive screen time depletes the mind of energy. And more importantly, it decreases your ability to concentrate on important things. It also causes anxiety, because you're getting into a cycle of always getting that dopamine hit of that validation, a new video that you want to see. And then your attention span is starting to get much smaller. Instead of reading books or watching movies and stuff, people are only able to, listen to or watch a 2 to 3 minute video, or even less. So overall, it's not very good in excess. It's not bad if it's done in moderation, but that's a hard sell, especially with young people these days.
Well, since we're on the topic of technology, AI has become quite popular, and I'm also curious how that is impacting mental health. I saw a report from Time magazine that was suggesting that it's impacting critical thinking, and I would imagine even creativity as well.
Yeah. It's a little scary to imagine what AI in the therapy field will become in the future. Right now, there are some organizations that are using it for preliminary stages of therapy, like for taking a history and asking questions and, getting the therapeutic process ready for an actual person. But there are also AI chat GPT programs that act as companions. And unfortunately, a lot of people are using them as actual companions as opposed to a live person where you can have human conversations with. And there have been some problems with it. There were a few deaths that they say are influenced by the chat GPT. Some people that were using that for personal, support and things like that. And I just don't think that technology is ready for that yet. It might be in the next 5 to 10 years, but it should not be used for that. If you have, any kind of mental health condition, you need to talk to a person and get yourself safe. And ChatGPT bot can't do that just yet. So eventually they will use what's called artificial empathy. It will get there, but it's just not smart enough yet to do that. Maybe I'm saying something controversial. I don't know, but I just don't think it's there yet. I think that if you're going through a difficult time and your conversation with this bot, let's say it's a therapy bot, is getting more complicated and you're getting more deeply depressed and you're maybe even suicidal, the bot doesn't have the capability to access, the authorities or a psychiatric pet team and get you safe. It just doesn't do that yet.
Before we go any further, I just want to ask you also, where is the line of somebody improving themselves on their own versus doing that in addition to somebody like yourself, a therapist?
I mean, that's a great question. I think it comes back to impairment. I think that self-help is important to have as an adjunct, whether that's books or podcasts or exercise or doing whatever it is that lifts your spirit, moves your soul and all that good stuff. But again, if you're really struggling and you cannot fulfill role obligations in your life and you have this impairment, you may not be able to do it alone. And again, that's a hard sell too for people because people feel that reaching out to a therapist is maybe ceding too much, that you're basically saying that you're weak and you need help and you can't do it yourself. So there's a lot of stigma still around that. It's much better now. But so I would say that, again, the key word is impairment. If you're struggling in that way, that's where you really need to reach out and get help. And it doesn't have to be help forever. It could be for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but just talking to somebody who, can give you some tools to manage that a little better.
Yeah, there's so many different types of therapy out there for people, and it can be helpful to have another person's perspective and also to be witnessed and to receive compassion in addition to whatever type of therapy techniques the person has to offer.
It's true. They might be surprised that having, a third party, somebody that they don't know, who they might feel less judged by, just being listened to is almost like giving somebody oxygen sometimes. Not everybody has close friends or close family that they can talk to. The psychotherapeutic modality of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is about, helping you identify negative thoughts or negative thought patterns that continue to add to your depression or your anxiety and replacing those with more realistic and practical ones. That one is invaluable. That works very well because a lot of people are hard on themselves about having depression and anxiety. And they sometimes blame themselves for having this, that they look at having depression or anxiety as a personal failure in some way. And it's good to see that, for example, sometimes we get into emotional reasoning. We feel depressed. And so we look at the future or other people or our jobs or the state of the world. We see that in a negative way, not because that's the way the world is, but because it's my depression talking. And so CBT helps you to kind of separate all of that and make sense of your thoughts as opposed to reality.
People can have toxic shame and have distorted thinking.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that word. Toxic shame is a really good way to look at it. The shame factor is very high. I had it too, when I had my deep depression and my panic attacks, this was the 1970s. I didn't want to tell anybody that I was feeling that because I was afraid. I thought I was really going crazy. And my parents, again, loving people, had no language for me. They thought that I just needed to, exercise more or eat better or, do happier things. And some of that is true. And you do need to do all of that, but it's not enough. It's just not enough.
Looking back at that time in your life with all that you know and all the experiences you've had yourself with therapy and guiding other patients, what do you think that little boy, that part of you when you're younger, needed at that time? If you could go back in time, what would help him?
Well, what helped me was in the early 80s, I finally gave in and I went to see a psychotherapist in New York City who basically changed my life. And she gave me language to this. She said, oh, you have something called panic disorder. You have anxiety. These are symptoms of depression. And I, did double takes on that. I was like, there's names for these things. I mean, that sounds crazy, but this was 1984. I was 23 at the time. So, she gave me definition and she gave me hope because, there was no internet in those days. So I went immediately to the library and to bookstores and I got every single book that I could get about this. And I started to educate myself. So that paired with opening up my imagination through my aesthetics, I started to heal myself that way. I started to understand myself a little bit better and accept that I wish I wasn't wired this way, but I was.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness you found healing and magic in your tragic experiences. Let's move a little bit more into the magic. How can people move from sadness to inspiration, joy, or awe?
One of my favorite chapters in the book is when it starts the discussion about inspiration exposure. And that's where, as we discussed before, we intentionally immerse ourselves in our own aesthetics, even in your darkest moment. And, art has a way of healing our wounds. It has a way of legitimizing our pain, as I described before. And it gives us a way to open up possibilities. I think I'm going to quote Einstein. Einstein said that logic will take you from A to B, but imagination can take you everywhere. So if you can start getting into that wonder, that kind of amazement about things, whether that's any subject that you want, again, you start to reassociate your pain with beautiful things so that it's not always something that you avoid. It's something that you walk towards. Mm-hmm. For most people, the reflex is to push pain away, and naturally so. I don't know anybody that says, I can't wait to feel pain today. But by introducing inspiration exposure, your day is set up differently. I want people to wake up in the morning and say, you know what, whatever happens today, I'm going to be ready for it because I know that if I do feel this pain, I can create it into something constructive. As opposed to, oh my God, I hope I don't feel any pain today, and you're white knuckling the whole day, hoping that you have no grief and no sadness and no adversity. And Emmy, that's just unrealistic. It's just unrealistic. So if you do that paradoxically, you feel better during the day because you'll be prepared for it and you're not so ambushed by it.
Can you share a little bit more about this inspiration exposure that you share in your book that helps people find the magic in the tragic?
Taking an inventory, and that's in the first chapter, taking an inventory of your favorite song, your favorite movie, your favorite passage in a book, your favorite line of poetry, your favorite place in nature, and having those close by, carrying them with you, or looking at them every morning. For example, take this, Emmy. When was the last time, this is a rhetorical question, but try to think of the last time that you were inspired by something, anything. Let's say a place in nature. I try to instruct people to not just let that feeling go away, but capture that feeling, add the intention and say, why is it that this mountain or this beach or this place in the woods or any place or this song or this paragraph in a book that I love, why, or a scene in a movie, why is it that inspires me? So I have them describe it exactly. Like, do you like the language of that passage? Do you like the way that this movie is shot? Do you like the way the sun drops below the horizon? Do you like the way the moon glows? And the more and more you describe it, the more and more you relate to it, and the more and more you appreciate it. And that's building resilience, because you are bringing simple things that you might take for granted into your life, and that makes you much happier. So I challenge you, the next time you feel inspired by anything, try to ask yourself, what is that? Some people say it's the divine. Some people say that that's how the divine talks to us. That they see God, or they see whatever their creator is, the Almighty, in that it's so beautiful and I get chills. Why do I get those chills? Frankly, we know how you get the chills, but we don't know why you get the chills. Nobody knows that, but it does work. And, so that's one exercise in the book that I like, because I like to see people light up when they take the inventory about the things that they love.
Yeah, I did it when I was reading your book and found it really pleasant. And maybe it's connecting with that awe and transcending that pain. And maybe it's really coming home to our true selves. You also talk about connecting with the higher self that can be helpful in this process as well.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. So when you are connecting to these aesthetics that move you and lift your spirit, you are connecting to your higher self. You are inspiring the executive brain, as I mentioned before, it's called the prefrontal cortex. So if you can hold your grief in high regard that way, and again, pair it with your higher self, the possibilities are endless. So if you are coming back to you, this is your true self. I prefer people thinking of themselves that way as their true selves, instead of identifying with all the depression that they've been dealing with. And you can think about it as a flip of the coin. You could look back and say, oh my God, I'm so weak. The last 20 years, I've been so depressed and I could have done so many things. I try to flip that for them and say, but you could also say that in the last 20 years, you've survived this depression. And here you are. So you're kind of like a ninja warrior in many ways, because here you are and you did it. So the way that you're looking back at it, the quality of it is your negative interpretation. So it's not always the context that bothers people. It's the way that they think of the context. Your negative interpretation that you should have done more in the last 20 years is worse than the last 20 years that you spent being depressed. So that's what CBT tries to help. But getting back to your original question, yes, the inspiration exposure is key. And I've never met anybody that has not been inspired by something, whether it's a rap song, or it's a classical piece of music, or it's gardening, or it's pottery, or it's birding, or it's equestrian, a love for horses. Everyone's got something, and you have to find what that is.
I was just thinking about how I went through a transition many years ago, and I rented an office at a center, and my business didn't quite coalesce there the way I wanted it to. But when I moved my practice to another location, it began thriving. So that was helpful. However, I still felt during that transition, I felt a lot of grief. Also, what helped me, in addition to the inspiration of other pieces of art that had already been created, was creating my own art.
Absolutely. Creativity is a huge aesthetic. Yeah, playing an instrument, composing music, building, crafting, anything that's creative is very important to do that. So, when people say to me, what's some advice that you can give somebody? I say, try to find ways in these aesthetics to give yourself uplifting chills as often as possible. You need to create that, whatever that might be. And so if I can do that once a day or even once a week, I reconnect to something important in me, something that matters, something that has value. Mm-hmm. Because if I can find ways without medication, I'm not saying that people shouldn't take medication if they're depressed or anxious, because I've taken medication a lot. So I'm just saying that if you want to go organic and holistic, and use this as an adjunct, finding that aesthetic and learning how to give yourself chills as often as possible will do wonders for you.
How much do you feel the inspiration exposure, the aesthetics that help people feel this awe and get goosebumps and so forth is a connection to something beyond our individual selves?
It's a good question. Like I say, we know the mechanics of it. We know the part of the brain that it inspires, which we talked about. We know the chemicals that are released in there. Why that happens, we're not sure. So for many people, if you want to draw the conclusion that it is something very spiritual, and that is the way you connect to others, so be it. I have a chapter in the book about spirituality, and that connects you to gratitude and purpose and wanting to communicate with others and stuff. So in other words, if I want to create more happiness in my life, sure, I can start hanging out with more people if I was, isolating and stuff. But if I can inspire myself a little bit, I might be more apt to want to be with more people as opposed to just forcing myself to be with people. If I am open to finding purpose in my life, and it doesn't have to be a lofty purpose, it could just be the purpose of the day. And I'm open to opening up my awareness to things. Some people call that having a sense of spirituality. Spirituality, I think, is something that people underestimate too. They see that as very woo-woo. And my goal in the book was trying to take the woo out of the woo-woo and just see it as something that, we can all connect to. And it doesn't have to be something complicated. Spirituality comes from spiritus, which means to breathe easy, maybe to breathe in, life-giving oxygen. I don't know. But to breathe easy and to take a deep breath and exhale is really what spirituality is. And so I do that best when I'm connecting with others, I have my purpose, and I'm aware of my aesthetics.
I believe in the United States that people who identify as spiritual but not religious is the largest growing segment of people who are not otherwise atheist per se. And so I think that many people, that's probably why people are listening to this right now as well. They're looking for spirituality, whatever flavor it is for them. And you're right. People have different definitions. It could be connecting with something that's greater than ourselves, or maybe it's finding the connection within us, which is the drop in the ocean we're all part of, or the ocean and the drop that we're all a part of together, perhaps. And one of those binding agents that I think is paramount is that sense of love, right? Like we love a piece of art. We love music. We love people. And so when we do have a loss of somebody who has died, or heaven forbid, if somebody betrays you, which does happen as well, or you're the betrayer, that we can really get in juggernauts around our relationship to loving ourselves and also loving others.
I think spirituality is a great place to start with loving self because it's such an individualistic belief system. It's not set in creeds and particular scripture and things like that, that's the beauty in it, finding God or the Almighty as you understand him or her, or whatever you want to call it. And that's a journey. And that's a journey that doesn't really end. It doesn't have any boundaries. You can always learn something new. And whenever I listen to my aesthetics or I engage in my awe-inducing activities, I always learn something new in it. But I never walk away feeling worse than how I was feeling. I always walk away feeling a little bit better. And it doesn't always work. It's not like, I'm really sad and I listen to Dvorak's New World Symphony, the Adagio, which was probably the saddest piece of music I've ever heard in my life. But it's a gorgeous piece. It's not like I just listen to that and I snap my fingers and I feel better. But it's a process. Cumulatively, that's the way it works. I don't want to let it go away. I want to capture it and evolve from it. So once you hear it, you'll say, oh, of course I know that piece. And for all your listeners, if you really want to practice inspiration exposure, it's Antonin Dvorak, and he's a Czech composer, and it's the New World Symphony, but it's the Adagio. There's 4 parts. And the Adagio is this very, very sad, melancholic, but sublimely beautiful piece of music. It's been covered and copied a million times. And it's also a piece called Going Home. And it's dedicated to, saying goodbye to close friends. It's dedicated, it's used as an anthem for difficult times. And it was written by the composer because he had spent a lot of time in the New World in America and he was missing his family. And so when he was finally going home, his longing and his missing them inspired him to create the piece. And there's dozens of other pieces, but that's probably the saddest piece in my mind. So it's a powerful tool.
It sounds like you're suggesting on one hand that we move toward that which brings us awe and transcendence or a sense of pleasure and joy and beauty. And at the same time, you're suggesting that we let ourselves become immersed in the heartache so that we can really feel it.
Exactly. For me personally, that piece dignifies my pain. I think, wow, that is so beautiful. And maybe there's some beauty in what I'm feeling, no matter how absurd it is. A lost relationship, some kind of hardship. It's really more about the minutia of the moment. It's not about a cure-all. It's not a panacea. It's just in that moment. Can I convert that into some purpose in some way? So yes, I like transcendence. I like exalting. I like creating curiosity and stuff. So again, it's the intention, Emmy. Be it cause, not an effect. You want to create the cause of that. That takes practice.
You mentioned 4 pillars of spirituality in your book. Could we expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's creating awareness. So I have to create the intention and I have to create the commitment that I'm going to be much more aware of how I'm feeling, maybe using my aesthetics in that moment to increase my awareness and to not just default into this is a bad feeling and I don't want to feel it. Make it go away. So that's number 1. Number 2 is gratitude. One great way to help you when you're going through a difficult time is just for 5 minutes, and the book describes that too, is to make a short list, 3 or 5 items about things that you are grateful for right now. Sure, there's always going to be things that you want and things that you're going to wish for. And those are good because those create goals. But we need to also take the inventory that there are things that we have at this moment right now that are actually helping me. Because if you think about it, if you're always seeking happiness, then if you're chasing happiness, in a very vigorous way, what you're also saying is that I don't have happiness right now and I'm always chasing it. So you're forgetting about or setting aside or neglecting things right now that do make you happy, whether that's seeing the sunshine every morning or eating breakfast or having your morning coffee. It doesn't really matter. So that's number 2. Number 3 is human connection. As we discussed, we do not do well when we're isolated, and the pandemic showed us that. More connection we have with people in person. I don't mean necessarily virtually, and especially not DMing people, direct messaging. That's not really the connection we're talking about. And then 4th, probably the most important one, is having purpose. It's important to have purpose each day. It doesn't have to be something huge and grand. It's not like you have to go out there and cure cancer. But each day you need to have some structure, something that you either look forward to or you have to do for someone else. Some kind of purpose each day. If you do those 4 things, your day will have a different complexion and you'll be identifying with important things as opposed to all the negative things.
Can you give an example of how somebody can connect with their aesthetics, which would be poetry, music, something that inspires them, that helps them increase their awareness?
So in the awareness, I will say, be an observer today. The next time something inspires you, you get chills up your back or you feel better just for a second, to write it down. Maybe it's a conversation that you had with the barista at Starbucks. Somebody made you smile, or you ate something that you liked, or you saw a cloud that looked really beautiful, or the moon came up in a certain way, or again, you got to be creative for a couple of minutes. So it's being an observer of your feelings and thoughts and not being a victim of your thoughts.
When people go through significant loss or change, even, of course, trauma, they can question everything. They can question their meaning, their purpose, maybe even their connection to their own understanding of the relationship to spirituality or religion. What kind of advice can you give to somebody when they feel like, I don't have any meaning or purpose anymore. I'm not sure what my meaning and purpose is in my life, which can be a very existential crisis for people just in general.
So that's where the cognitive behavioral therapy aspect comes in, which is that your thoughts are skewed right now because you are depressed. Your thoughts are skewed because you're anxious and you're feeling scared. So because it's not always the context that scares us or depresses us, it's our condition that is influencing our thoughts. And that's in the book too. So it's about giving yourself permission to have a bad day and to not necessarily take what your thoughts and feelings are at face value, because again, your thoughts are skewed. So giving yourself permission to have a bad day and being able to say, you know what, today is a wash. Today's not a good day. And I'm going to access my pillars of spirituality. I'm going to access my aesthetics. And then we'll see how I feel tomorrow or maybe this afternoon. So it's helping people understand that just because you think something doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't believe every thought that you have. Not every thought has value.
Yeah.
Supposedly human beings have, I don't even know how they came with this number, but something like 40 or 45,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So you can't attend to every thought, but because the mind is designed to prioritize negative thoughts, that's how we've stayed alive all of these thousands of years. We prioritize danger. The reflex is to focus on those dangers. But if you don't realize that in that moment, that focus is influenced by your depression or your anxiety, you're going to believe them. And so my job is to try to help you to wait, let's examine that. You know, let me play devil's advocate with that. I'm not so sure that, you know, you've been weak for the last 20 years. Maybe you've been strong for the last 20 years. I'm not so sure that you're a failure because this happened today. Not so sure about that. Let's talk about that. So I will always challenge those thoughts. Otherwise, they'll see them as rock bottom data, and it's not.
You mentioned awareness, which makes me think of a very popular method these days called mindfulness that I know you also mention in your book. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a little taste of how people who maybe aren't familiar with it, or maybe they have a practice of it, how they can be inspired by that and it can assist them with their thoughts and feelings.
So mindfulness is, you know, usually mistaken for spending long periods of time meditating, 30 to 40 minutes, which I don't even do well. I do 3 to 5 minute meditations, and that's also in the book. So that's kind of mindfulness, meaning mindfulness is trying to cultivate your ability to accept your awareness. In other words, being aware of being aware. In other words, this way I can help myself develop a different relationship with discomfort. If you are in the throes of healthy mindfulness, you are noticing the discomfort, you're describing it, you're telling the other person or the therapist or whoever or yourself, I feel it in my chest, I feel it in my bones, I feel it in my throat. And the more and more you build awareness around that instead of running from it, the more awareness and more mindfulness you create out of it. So while you do that, you reduce the power of it because you are building a different relationship with it. So a mindfulness therapist might say to you, if you were in their office, I feel really scared about this public speaking thing I have to do tomorrow. A good mindfulness therapist will ask you, let's talk about that. Let's describe it. Tell me exactly how it feels. Where do you feel it? Tell me what the thoughts are around that. So you're building a different conversation around it. So mindfulness works best, in my opinion, when you take time throughout the day, maybe in the morning, even in the afternoon or in the evening, to try to slow your mind down a little bit. I listen to these 3 to 5 minute guided meditations, and you can find them on the internet. They're everywhere. And I just listened to this person telling me that I'm okay. Whatever you're feeling is fine. It's sort of like kitschy stuff, but I just need to be reminded of that. And then it slows me down. It makes me accept any kind of feeling that comes in my mind throughout the day, instead of me feeling like I don't want to have that feeling. So that's what mindfulness is. It's really trying to build your awareness to who you are, what you're feeling, and what's happening in the moment right at this minute.
Right, because we can judge ourselves for even having certain thoughts or emotions or reject those parts of ourselves. And I believe there's also research that shows that when we try to suppress thoughts and emotions, that they just keep popping back up. And it's almost like trying to play like whack-a-mole, but and sometimes they could even get stronger if we try to push them down. Is that right?
That's right. And so I also have people identify 3 important things that usually cause anxiety. It's needing an excessive amount of control about something you're worried about. Being a perfectionist, thinking that you have to do everything right, and you see things in all or nothing terms, or you get into people pleasing or relying on others for approval. So what I say to people, practice your mindfulness whenever you're feeling like something tomorrow is not in your control and it's scaring you. Use the intention to say, you know what, Emmy, for the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to let go of needing tomorrow to go perfectly. And that little respite of letting go and then doing something else at the time. But that little respite is like those 5 to 10 minute power naps that people do. It's just stopping the mind from the spinning for that moment. But again, without the intention, it doesn't work. So it's okay to say, it's okay for me not to be perfect just for the next 10 minutes. And then when the 10 minutes is up, you set another goal, maybe another 15 minutes. And as the day progresses, you start to realize how tense you are because you've been clinging to this organizing principle that I have to be perfect and that I have to have complete control of everything, or worse, that I have to please everybody. That's a big one.
It seems that mindfulness can also help us to develop a sense of self-acceptance, self-compassion, and even self-love.
Yes, I believe that that's where all of that starts. I think that the measure of success and growth that people experience in therapy has to start with a certain degree of acceptance about your condition, about who you are, somehow to reconcile decisions that you've made in the past that you are still beating yourself up about, and just and not being Pollyanna-ish about it and just blowing things off. No, it's good to talk about things and it may take time, things that you wish had happened differently or decisions that you made that you thought were poor. But that doesn't happen overnight. But it's helpful to do that. And it's helpful to create that kind of acceptance. And again, I think that's where the growth is. You have to accept that you were human and you did the best that you could at the time.
Myself being an intuition lover and one who uses it a lot in my life and supports others with it as well, which is why I love having these conversations, because it can also be quite helpful for people. I'm wondering if you found that when people are able to quiet their mind, get their emotions to settle a bit, not that they're bad or wrong, they have to ride the ocean of the waves and so forth. Do you find that people experience creative inspiration, new insights that come forward from within themselves that can guide them forward in ways that maybe they hadn't thought of before when they were really on those bumpy seas?
I do, very strongly. Again, if you can put aside the excessive need for control, the perfectionism, and the people-pleasing throughout your day. And of course, there's many other thinking styles that could inspire anxiety. Those are just 3. If you can do that, then you might be able to listen to your true self a little bit better. You might be able to listen to that wise heart that you have. But sometimes you can't get to it because you don't trust it. And you're in the muck, the swelter of your anxiety and your depression, and you're not thinking clearly. So I find that when I can put all of my negative thoughts aside because I am in anxiety or I am depressed a little bit, and I can get to my aesthetics, or I can just have some peace and quiet for myself a little bit, I make better decisions. And the next 5 minutes, I'm going to make an even better decision. Think about the next time you get triggered about something that you're scared about, Emmy, or something that you're sad about. If before you act on it, which might be something frivolous, if before you act on it, you do a little mindfulness, a 3 to 5 minute meditation, or even a guided meditation, or you engage in an aesthetic, I promise you the next 5 minutes, your thoughts about what you thought about 5 minutes ago will be different. And if you wait another 5 minutes, even more different. So you have to pull back and take 5 and try to build that mindfulness muscle to be able to give yourself a chance to pull away those negative thinking cobwebs and get to more of the heart of it. I don't always succeed doing that, but I'm getting better at it.
Yeah. We need to honor our feelings and emotions, and at the same time, sometimes kind of step back from them so we don't stay caught up in them, so we can have another perspective. But it isn't that we're making those thoughts or feelings bad and wrong, because then we can separate them from ourselves and they can take on a life of their own.
Right. I think first step would be give myself permission. I'm giving myself permission to have an anxious thought, or give myself permission for having a sad thought. Let myself feel the totality of being human. And then from there, try to engage in, taking 5, noticing what I'm trying to control, noticing what I'm trying to be perfectionistic about, and notice whose opinion of me I'm worried about. Mm-hmm. The next time you feel anxious, Emmy, try to pull back and categorize whatever you're anxious about into those 3. Control, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. I promise you that it's going to be one of those or all 3 of those. It's a lifelong process. It is not, again, another cliche. It's not a destination. It's a journey. There is no destination. You're never going to not worry about the future. You're never going to not want to be perfect. You always want to do things right. And you're never not going to care about what other people think of you. It's never going to go away. That's how we find our place in society. We get along with people. We like people to like us. It's never going to go away.
And we do need a certain amount of pre-planning, or some may call it worry, but a certain amount of preparedness for the future. So some of it's normal, but when it moves over into a realm where people can start looping on thoughts or ruminating.
Exactly. So there's a big difference between planning for the future and being aware about what you need to do, and obsessing. If you're obsessing and it's, interfering with your routines and daily activities of the day, then you're a little bit over the top and you need to pull back, and you need some mindfulness. You need some spirituality. You need some magic in your tragic.
Definitely. Depending on how a person was raised and their own genetics, people have their own experience or perception of emotions and thoughts and feelings, meaning that some people were taught that feeling sad or angry is bad and wrong. And I think can we delineate how it's different to have the feeling versus act on those feelings and harm oneself or others? And also, I think a lot of people have been raised to be like a good little boy, a good little girl. And so have you found that colors people's ability to have that self-compassion and acceptance with what they're experiencing?
It does. And in The Magic and the Tragic, we discuss what I call organizing principles. Organizing principles are conclusions, sets of beliefs conclusions that we draw about life and about ourselves, and beliefs that we get passed down from our family, or we learned it from the media or the church or your synagogue or wherever, place of worship, that we live by. But unfortunately, sometimes, and this sometimes comes from our parents too, these organizing principles are about moving on and being strong. Don't show vulnerability to people. Crying was going to make it worse.
Big boys don't cry.
Yeah. And it's going to get worse if you do. If you wallow in it, you'll get worse. You need to have your little tearful moment, and then you need to move on. And that's just the way that our society has been. So I help people to try to unveil those organizing principles and figure out that that's not really your principle. That's something that you learned. Deep down inside, we know that the opposite is true, that feeling your feelings and having your emotions is actually healthier. But that's the way that we were raised, to be strong, to be rugged. My family had many organizing principles. Whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger, things like that. And, see the mountain, take the mountain, conquer the mountain. It's always about being strong, but there was never an organizing principle about being compassionate with yourself and giving yourself the permission and the kindness and the empathy to feel your feelings. So I think in this society, it's much more intense, I think, than others. There are societies out there, other countries that take grieving much more seriously, and they give people the time to grieve. We don't have the time to grieve. We're not allowed to do that. Almost like suffering is like a dirty word in this country. You just don't suffer. You just move on. And I don't think that's healthy. That's not building emotional resilience.
You also mentioned that we don't have to be victims, that we can create our own lives despite the suffering.
Exactly. I want to make sure that your listeners understand that I am not minimizing suffering and saying it's something easy and something that people should embrace. I'm not saying to embrace suffering. I will never embrace my suffering. Never. But I'm choosing to be moved by it. I'm choosing to look for the dignity in it. You want to try not to be afraid of your grief. You want to try to understand it as something that you need to feel to help you evolve better, to help you live life better, and again, to prepare you for the future.
Right. We're not at all minimizing suffering. I think we both know how significant it can be based on our own personal experiences and supporting others as well. You have an exercise in your book called Creating Good Karma. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that exercise.
So creating good karma, karma is, I forgot what the root of the word is, but I think it's...
To act?
Yes, I think it's action. You're right. Thank you for reminding me.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm at cause, not at effect, I'm creating karma for myself. Karma is not something that is necessarily about changing the karma of the universe. Some people believe that you can, that one person can create that butterfly effect and maybe help, the ethos and the consciousness change. Maybe that's true. I'm just saying it to create it for yourself. If I create good karma for myself, I'm building resilience because I'm taking action. And again, if you told me today that you could take suffering away from me for the rest of my life, however many years that's going to be, I would take it. I don't want to suffer anymore. But because that is unrealistic, I can find a way to create grief empowerment instead of grief avoidance. If I do that, I evolve better.
Can you give us a little taste of that, of what you suggest in that exercise?
Just engaging in inspiration exposure, taking that intention in that moment to look for my aesthetics, to look for that list of things that I wrote down, to go connect with people, to go be in nature, just to get out of my apartment or my home, just to go do something and create that action. That's creating karma for yourself.
In all your years of helping so many people, having taught at universities and worked in major medical systems and now in private practice, do you find that there can be gifts in the suffering? And of course, I know some people can really get taken down by it. Maybe it's because they haven't listened to conversations like this or found the right formula for them yet. Is there any gift in suffering?
Yes, evolutionarily, it does build emotional resilience, as we've discussed. So most people will say that there is no purpose in it because it's so painful. That the only good things that have purpose are the only things that have purpose are the good things. But I look at it this way. I think that if suffering didn't have a purpose, I think evolution would have eliminated it a long time ago. It's the same thing with dreams. Why do we dream? Nobody really knows why, but there's value if you talk about them and you inspect them and you extrapolate from them. if dreams didn't have a purpose, I think the mind would have eliminated it a long time ago. So you have to think of it in terms of natural selection. And there's something that we get either spiritually or physiologically that helps us with grief. And I think it's because it increases the sensitivity of the heart. It makes us closer to others. It prepares us for the future. And you can either learn from it and make it your teacher, or you can avoid it and not learn from it. And then each time it comes, you're just as resentful about it as possible. And my goal is to try to help people not be resentful of it. Try to move towards it as opposed to moving away from it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that sense of connection and compassion seem paramount.
It does. I don't think you can survive in the world without having some degree of compassion for yourself and for other people. I think people would go crazy and start doing, illegal things. You have to have concern for your fellow man and woman. You have to have concern. You have to have the ability to experience shame, remorse, and guilt. Otherwise, you're a sociopath. So you need to have those feelings. And that means that you might love in a big way and you might lose that love too. And then you have to deal with that pain. But the love that you experience will always outweigh the pain, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to love each other and to stretch ourselves and to grow and to elevate awareness. And some people might disagree with that, but I think that's what the purpose is.
I 100% agree with you. What do you say to people who might be listening thinking, oh my gosh, the world has gone crazy. There's so much tension happening. It definitely all over the place in the world. And of course, here in the United States. What do you say to people who are thinking, well, it's outside of me. I don't have any control. And how do I go forward in these times with so much uncertainty and, for many people, even fear because of, quite frankly, their skin color or what have you?
I still believe that there is a way for us to be able to accept this new norm of uncertainty. And ever since I've been alive, I've never known this kind of uncertainty. And the pandemic was the first example of that. We did not know whether this was going to be over in a month or it was going to be the rest of our lives. We had no clue. And you couldn't say to people, this is an isolated incident and this is going to be over by September when we went into lockdown in March. I couldn't say that to people, so I didn't have answers for them. So all you can do is work on the minutia of the moment and focus on what you do have control over. If that involves practicing news hygiene, then do that. It's okay to stay up to date, but don't saturate. Focus on your family and your work and whatever that you have control over right now in this moment today, at this moment, not what's going to happen tomorrow. That's a really hard sell as well. It's really hard to do, but it's just a new norm. And like anything else that we have faced before, it's like having a loved one that's ill and you don't know how their illness is going to go. The illness is in control and you can do the best that you can to keep them comfortable, try to find them the best doctors and hope for the best. And I think that's the best way to get through this difficult time, is to focus on what you have control over.
Perhaps to take action in ways that a person feels is beneficial to everyone. For example, the gun violence seems to be out of control. And I just saw, I believe it was students here in Minneapolis who were marching in the streets demanding so that safety, because they don't want to be killed at school. They want to feel safe. And they should be able to feel safe going to school.
That's right. There was a time when we could say that school shootings were isolated incidences. Can't say that anymore. I can't in good conscience say that to somebody in therapy because it's not true. We're all very vulnerable now. So if you focus on things you have control over, that also means stick to your routines. Don't change anything. Stick to your structure. Don't try to change a lot in your life because you think that, what's the point? Or things are never going to get better. That's not true. We can adapt. And, the evolutionary sort of code is true, I believe, that it's not the strongest that survive. It's not even the smartest that survive. It's the ones that adapt that survive. So we have to find ways to adapt to this new uncertainty. And it's a very uncomfortable uncertainty. I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with it. But if I dwell on it all day long, Emmy, and I don't access my aesthetics, I will not be able to get up in the morning. It's too much for me. It's just too much. And I don't think that's being weak. I think it's just being hyper aware of the reality of life. So we need to find that magic in the tragic.
John, you've shared so much today. Thank you for all of your inspiration and great advice, really. Is there anything else you want to share today about how people can find the magic in the tragic?
Just a reminder that, there's a lot of benefit in finding ways to uplift your spirit as often as possible, to give yourself chills, and that don't minimize it, that there is something very important about that feeling that you get when you are inspired. And the more you can induce yourself to do that each day, the easier it will be to get through the difficult time. And make a list. I would tell anybody who's listening to this podcast, get out a piece of paper right now and make a list of some of your 5 favorite things that you love. And try to describe why it is that you love it. And keep that close to you. Keep it near your bed, carry it with you, put it on a Post-it note and put it on your computer, or put it on your refrigerator door, or put it on the dashboard of your car, so that you're always in the conversation of your aesthetics. You're always in the conversation of being inspired.
Great advice. John Tsilimparis, thank you so much for all that you've shared today. I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you, and I really hope that many others are inspired by this conversation as well.
Thanks for having me, Emmy. It was fun.
Thanks for being with me. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.